We don't forget about the special teams here at Mark Rogers TV. We bring in Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC to break down the top 10 players on the special teams. Mike's got his list. I have mine. So we'll start with Mike. Who do you have from the ACC in 2015?
All right, top 10 special teams players. We'll start with number 9, Florida State kicker Roberto Aguayo. Once again, perfect on PATs this year, 49 of 49 on the extra points. He also went 21 of 26 on field goals. That's nearly 81% of his kicks. He's number 10 on my list. Number 9, Duke place kicker Ross Martin, 42 of 42 on his point after attempts this year. He went 26 of 30 on field goals for 86.7%, which led the ACC. Number 8, Michael Badgley, Miami place kicker. He went 40 for 40 on his point after attempts, 25 or 30. On his field goals, 83.3% was third in the ACC this year. Number 7, we got Virginia punter Nicholas Conti. If we know anything about Virginia's offense under Mike London, we know that they had to punt a lot, and that meant Nick Conti was on the field a ton. 44.7 yards per punt, ranked second in the ACC. Number 6, NC State punt returner Berlon Cherry. Berlon Cherry was a big-time player in the NC State return game. He led the ACC with 13.3 yards per punt return, and he also had returned one of those for a score this season. Number 5, we saw him a lot last night, Greg Kugel, the Clemson place kicker. He was 57 of 62 on point after attempts this year, and we know that Clemson's offense scored a ton of points, so he kicked a lot of point after attempts, and he also kicked a ton of field goals for the Tigers. He went 27 of 32 on his field goals, 84.4%. was second in the ACC. Kaysen Beatty, the punter for Florida State, is number 4 on my list. He had an ACC leading 45.2 yards per punt for a Florida State offense that punted a little bit more this year than in years past, with some inconsistent play on the offensive side of the football this season in absence of Jameis Winston, who, of course, won the Heisman 2 years ago and was a very good player for Florida State once again last season at quarterback. So without him, Florida State's offense wasn't nearly as consistent as they have been in the past. Number 4 on my list is former All-American and current All-ACC kick returner Ryan Switzer. Switzer, in addition to his kick returning duties, also returns punts. He had 13.7 yards per punt return this year. That ranked second in the ACC. He also brought back 2 touchdowns on his punt returns this year, further establishing himself as one of the top punt returners in the nation. Number 3 on my list is Syracuse punt returner Grizzly Esteem. Esteem had 18.1 yards per punt return and 2 touchdowns on the season, and he led the ACC in his yards per punt return average. Number 2 on my list is NC State kick returner Naheem Hines, who led the conference with 920 kick return yards and a touchdown on the season. And rounding out my list is Duke kick returner Devon Edwards, 29.2 yards per kick return, was tops in the ACC. Additionally, he had a league-leading 3 touchdowns on special teams for the Blue Devils.
All right, Mike, the top 10 lists are pretty close. I've got a few other guys sprinkled in here. So at number 10, I'm going Roberto Aguayo as well. He's probably one of the more well-known of the specialists around the country because he's been exceptional during his stay at Florida State, but fell off a little bit as a junior this season. 21 of 26. He was almost perfect during his first 2 years at Florida State. Again, 21 of 26 for the ACC division runner-ups. Number 9, Alex Cannell, Wake Forest punter. What's funny about him is he has now set the all-time collegiate record for the most punts. He's been on the field because of the Wake Forest offense and because of his tenure at Wake Forest and basically being the punter his entire stay. He is number 1 all-time in punts and punt yardage at Wake Forest. He was 3rd in the ACC for his punts. He's become almost a cult hero there at Wake Forest because of his time on the field. Nicholas Conti at number 8. You talked about him from Virginia. second in the ACC in punting. What I found interesting in looking up some things on Nicholas Conti, he was a lacrosse player, swimmer, and also soccer player in high school, did not kick on the football team, wanted to kick on the football team, so he YouTubed, how do you punt a football? And he took his punting skill or his soccer kicking skills and practiced his punting. And by the time he got to punting and place kicking in high school, he was a recruit, makes his way to Virginia, is one of the top specialists in the country after YouTubing and then going out there and giving it a go. Number 7, Kason Beatty. Interesting story here from Florida State. Punter on the national championship team in 2013, the semifinal team in 2014. But for a team that was just star ridden all over the place, he was actually a weak link, had a poor 2014, was challenged by Jimbo Fisher. It got so bad because of the rabid Florida State fan base is that he completely went off of social media. No Facebook, no Twitter, no Snapchat, no nothing for him. And he came back and had an exceptional season this year, number 1 in the ACC in punting. At number 6, a player that you have, explosive player from NC State, Nyheim Hines. He also was on the field all over the place on offense, played in the slot, played wide, got a number of carries with Matt Days on the shelf for NC State. So he was all over the place, actually was one of 3 freshmen in the nation with over 1,200 yards, all-purpose yards, led the ACC in kickoff return yards at 920, also brought one back to the house. Hines at number 6. Number 5, I've got Nick Weiler from North Carolina, place kicker. Very inconsistent in 2014. So he was the part-time kicker in 2014, shared the duties there. They would not let him kick longer than a 30-yard field goal at that point. That's how bad the place kicking situation was with the Tar Heels in 14. But he really shored things up in the offseason, came back to hit 20 of 23, the top percentage in the ACC, including one from 48 yards. All right, at number 4, I as well have Ross Martin, the Duke place kicker as a senior. Really had a fine season, 26 of 30, 53-yarder against BC that won the game 9-7. So he was the Duke offense against the Boston College Eagles, winning that game 9-7. Also kicked the game winner in the Pinstripe Bowl, handing Duke its first postseason win in 64 years against Indiana. This kid has been highly touted since coming out of high school, was number 1 rated place kicker according to Rivals and number 2 according to Scout ESPN and 24/7. And finally, after a rough start to his career, he has turned out to be a gem. Ryan Switzer at number 3, much heralded player out of North Carolina. We know what he did coming onto the scene as a freshman. Immediately was a threat in the punt return game. 4th in the ACC this past season with 2 touchdowns, as you mentioned. One of those, an 85-yarder. Ryan Switzer, of course, starting wide receiver for Carolina as well, and led the team in receptions. Number 2, I also like Brisley Esteem out of Syracuse. This kid is already, and if you understand Syracuse football going back, number of great players offensively for this school, and he is top 5 in punt returns, punt return average, touchdowns, and yardage. Led the ACC at 16 yards per punt return, also returned kickoffs, 30 of those, and 2 punt return TDs. And me as well, Mike, at number 1, Devon Edwards. This kid, interesting story here, currently a junior at Duke, finishing up in 2015, only got 1 scholarship offer. That was from David Cutcliffe. He had a broken collarbone as a junior, still bounced back to have a decent senior season, but really wasn't on the radar for anyone. David Cutcliffe liked what he saw, offered him the scholarship, and he has been one of the top kickoff and punt return guys in the nation ever since. Had 3 touchdowns this year. And again, if you look up the numbers, he has been in the top 10 in kickoff return average and touchdowns scored in his 3 years at Duke. So there's my top 10. And again, we invite you to write it in your comments, your suggestions, and let us know where we missed it possibly, and we'll have a discussion on that. For Mike McDaniel from Inside the ACC, this is Mark Rogers of Mark Rogers TV.